The universe began to exist, and something supernatural had to create it. The universe began to exist, and something supernatural had to create it. It's very interesting, brothers and sisters. We now know that we live in a very unusual universe. This universe has not been here forever. As a matter of fact, we now know beyond any reasonable doubt that the universe of space, time, and matter began to exist at a point in the past. We know this. Two ways we know it. There are four, but I'll give you two of them this morning. First of all, the second law of thermodynamics applied to the universe. The second law of thermodynamics applied to the universe. $1.98 word, but basically the second law of thermodynamics, when you apply it to the universe, says, basically this is the point, the universe is running out of gas. That's the point. We now know the universe is using up its useful energy. The energy in the universe that's useful is being burned up like fuel. You might want to think of the universe as an automobile with a limited amount of fuel in it that's being burned up as the car is driven. Or you might want to think of the universe as a watch that has been wound up and the battery is using up energy as the watch winds down. Now, what's eventually going to happen to that automobile? It's going to run out of gas. What's going to happen to the watch? It's going to stop because it's going to use up its fuel in the form of its battery. Now, Time magazine a few years ago ran a featured story on the cover as to how the universe is going to end. And in the Time magazine article, it said that our universe is three things are going to happen to the universe that we live in. Number one, the lights are going to go out. Now, why is that? Well, where does light come from? It comes from stars, and more specifically, from nuclear reactions that are burning inside stars. Well, guess what's going to happen to the sun and all the stars eventually? Those reactions are going to use up all the fuel that is contained in those stars, and every single one of them is going to go out. There's not going to be any light any longer anywhere. Secondly, the heat's going to go out. Somebody's going to turn the heat off. And that's for the same reason that the nuclear reactions generating heat are going to be burned up, and there will no longer be any fuel to generate heat anywhere in the universe. Third and finally, the universe is going to become motionless. That's called the quiescent universe. The universe is going to reach a point where there will no longer be any motion in it. Now, can you understand that if the universe never had a beginning, that means it's always been here? And if it's always been here and it's using up its fuel, it should have used up its fuel infinitely long ago. Or to put the point a little bit differently, if the universe didn't have a beginning, we should have already reached the point where there was no light, no heat, and no motion. Because we haven't reached that point yet, and because the universe is running out of its energy, there had to be a point here where it began. And as one British scientist, Paul Davies, said, it looks like there was a time when the universe was wound up, and it's winding down ever since. That's the first piece of evidence that the universe had a beginning. Here's the second piece of evidence that the universe had a beginning. The galaxies are all expanding away from one another through time. You might want to look at it like this. The galaxies are all expanding away from one another through time. People used to think the galaxies were motionless or stable, but we know that's not true any longer. We now know that the galaxies are actually moving, and they're all flying away from each other. Think of it like this. Suppose I had a balloon that I blew up and had about a third of it blown up, and I put dots on the surface of the balloon with a pen. And let's let the ink dots each one represent a galaxy. What would happen if I blew the balloon up again? What would happen to those dots relative to each other? You understand they would expand away from one another. That is exactly what's happening to the universe. Each galaxy is moving away as time goes on from all the other galaxies. But then, as scientists have pointed out, if you extrapolate backwards and shrink the balloon, what happens is they keep coming closer and closer together until you get a point where the entire universe of space, time, and matter spring into existence. How do I know the universe began to exist? A, the second law tells us it's using up its fuel. It couldn't have been doing that forever. It would have already used it all up, so the past has to be finite. And if the past is finite, there was a start to time. B, the universe is expanding away. All the galaxies are flying away from one another. If you extrapolate back in time, you reach the beginning point when the universe comes into existence. Now, if you have something winding down, and if it was wound up, there has to be a winder-upper. If you have a big bang, as Ted Koppel said once on Nightline, it seems to me there has to be a big banger. And here's why. Here's why. You cannot get something from nothing. You can't get something springing into existence from nothing without anything causing it. It is impossible to get something from nothing without any cause whatsoever. But do you see what this means? This means that since the universe began to exist, the natural world began to exist, something supernatural, completely outside the universe, had to cause it to come into existence. That is the only rational explanation for the origin of the universe, is that there was, in fact, a supernatural cause for the universe beginning to exist.
Either the cause was personal or it was impersonal. Let's think about what this uncaused cause would look like. The first cause would be non-contingent, meaning that its existence depends on nothing but itself. If it was contingent, then it would simply be one more effect in the chain of causes and effects. It must also be transcendent. This means that the cause of the universe must exist outside of and apart from the universe. And because this being exists apart from the universe, it must be immaterial. If it was material, then it would be part of the universe. The first cause would have to have the power to create the universe. Without this ability, nothing could be created. But these things are not enough to bring the universe into existence. There also needs to be a desire to create, a will to make the universe. Without this will to create, nothing would be created because the power to create could not be acted on. Now add all these things together. What kind of thing relies on nothing for its existence, exists apart from the universe, is immaterial, has the power to create something from nothing, and a will to do it or not to do it? Does this sound like a personal or impersonal being? Personal, of course. The ability to will is an attribute that belongs only to persons. Thus, the Kalam argument brings us to the conclusion that the universe had a beginning that was caused by a personal, powerful, transcendent, self-existing, immaterial being. In other words, God.
I was simply saying that this is not a mere matter of speculation, that there's more than a tiny bit of evidence on the table.
But is he saying
Evidence
that...
for what?
Evidence for a beginning of the universe.
Yes.
Well, we know that. Nobody disputes
All right, well,
that.
that's what I'm offering in this first argument, is the evidence.
But
Because
why?
there's a
Because nobody
beginning
disputes
doesn't
it.
imply a God.
It does if the first premise is true, that whatever begins to exist has a cause. It logically follows
Yeah,
that
but, it
therefore...
doesn't, but the cause hasn't got to be God.
Well, remember I gave an argument for thinking that this cause is timeless,
Yes, I know.
spaceless, immaterial, enormously powerful, and personal.
I think it's a computer.
Well, that wouldn't... computers are designed by people. I
No,
mean,
no, this is a self-designing computer.
Timeless.
Timeless.
well, that's a contradiction in terms.
Why is it time? What's contradictory about it?
A computer has to function. It takes
Oh no,
time.
this is a special computer.
Yeah, but it has to be logically coherent.
Oh, it's logically coherent.
Yes, you have to be
Oh
logically
no,
coherent.
this
And
computer
besides-
is amazing.
No, besides, it would have to be, as I said, a personal being.
No.
And a computer is a physical...
Not this computer.
Object.
Oh
Well, then-
no.
Okay, see, what you're doing is what you're calling a computer is really God. A non-physical, It's just another word if you rob it of all the attributes that make it a computer.